Well, hello everyone. I'm going to get started as we're now at time. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Please pop in the chat if you can't, although you wouldn't have heard that. So let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm in London, so it's 11 a.m. for me. So welcome to this session, Admins Learn to Leverage the Power of SOQL. You'll also notice in the chat panel, I have put the form for the raffle for this session. If you've attended other sessions, you'll know. But if you would like to fill that out at the end of the session, I'll run the raffle. It's all very, very clever, and one of you will win a prize. Okay, so of course, we must always thank our sponsors. Events like these aren't possible without the help and support of the sponsors. So here are some of the companies that have supported Pack Dreaming, which is great. Also, use this opportunity to say thank you to the organisers and everyone else who has spoken at today's event. And of course, everyone for coming along. So let me just introduce myself first of all. This is me. I'm Louise Lockie, as I mentioned, based in London in the UK. I am a 6 times MVP. I do have a golden hoodie, as you can see in that photo, and I'm 19 times certified. And here in London, I run the Women in Tech group and also a in-person conference that started again this year for its 7th year called London's Calling. Okay, and that is me with Parker Harris, so the CTO and co-founder of Salesforce, of course. So that's me. But back to the subject that we're talking about today, and that is SOQL. Now, this is a talk that I have done in the past, and I always love giving it because I do think it's a really good addition to every admin's skill set. So, what is SOQL? That's where we'll start, and it is quite simply Salesforce Object Query Language. So the language we use to query our Salesforce objects. So nice and straightforward. And yes, of course, it will spring to mind SQL, which you can use in other platforms. You can actually use it in part of the Salesforce platform and ecosystem with Marketing Cloud, because that's got a different back end. But this is specifically the Salesforce object query language, so it is a bit different and it is used solely with Salesforce. Okay, so that's what SOQL is, but how can it help admins? So you might think of it more as a developer tool, and yes, of course, it is used in writing Apex classes. You'll use SOQL to reference the data, to call the data, but we can use it as admins as well. And let me just talk you through a few reasons why I think it's useful for admins. So number one, it enables quick and easy data analysis. Now, I am a full-on data geek. I love to manipulate data, and I do find the standard reports and dashboards frustrating at times. I want to get at the back end and just look at the data and pull in all the different fields and objects I want to using the relationships, and not always have to go back and create a custom report type or edit one, etc. So for getting at the back end of data to look at your data in a raw form, SOQL can really help you out. It extends the use of existing tools. So a good example of this is if you're using Data Loader or Data Loader IO or another tool that does the similar thing. As you use it, you make the selections of how you want to, say, export some data using Data Loader or Data Loader IO, download it, manipulate it, upload it again, potentially. If you are doing that, it actually creates a piece of SOQL as you make your selections. But you could go into that SOQL statement in Data Loader and actually edit it with SOQL to make it, say, bring out related records. So you can actually go and edit that and use it there. So that's a really good use case for me, and I've done that in the past. It is a stepping stone to Apex because it's part of writing an Apex class or trigger. You will often see SOQL in the class. So if you can read SOQL, if you're familiar with it, then it's going to help you read the class or the piece of automation in your system. It can then mean if you do go on and want to learn, to maybe move into the programmatic tools, that part is then going to be more familiar to you, so it can help you there. It adds another marketable skill. So, we all hear all the time how many jobs there are in the ecosystem, but let's, also be honest that it's not always the easiest. There are a lot of people out there going for those jobs, and this can help us stand out from the crowd. It can be another skill for your tool set, your skill set rather, and you can therefore mean that you might get that job over someone else. And then another reason why I think learning SOQL is a good idea is we're all here on a Saturday learning and wanting to learn, and so that this is something else to learn. It treats the inner geek. I like to learn new things, and I think I'm not alone in that. But a further reason is that I think it's going to look very familiar to you. You will have used it before. So something like this on my screen, data loader, as you can see here, we've just made our selections here, but it has generated a SOQL statement. So many of you might have gone in and thought about editing that directly in the past, and so that is a SOQL statement. Similarly, using a logic in a filter or a report, it's all very similar. Even writing a formula, there was things that I'll highlight that are the same as writing a formula. So again, things that you're doing as admins that you will transfer very easily over to creating a SOQL statement. And where can we use it? So these are just a couple of different options, or 3 different options. We have tools that are sort of Salesforce tools like Workbench or Developer Console, both probably seen as developer tools, but really not very accessible for admins. I've done sessions in the past on these tools for admins independently. So Workbench, as you probably know, is a tool that was created by Salesforce staff, but it's not officially supported as a Salesforce product. Developer Console, of course, very much is. As in a Salesforce product and supported by them. As you know, you can simply get to that from your setup wheel cog in the system. I'll show you how we get to Workbench in a moment. And then the other one I've got on screen is Salesforce Inspector, but there are lots of other tools like this. Add-on, in this case, it's a Chrome extension inspector that you can write your SOQL in there as well. So lots of different places, and of course I already mentioned using, say, data loader IO, and writing it there as well. So I'm going to show you this in Workbench, but what I do want to flag is that there is a new kid in town when it comes to developer tools, and that is Visual Studio Code. And one of the add-ons for Visual Studio Code extensions is SOQL Builder. So this is a tool, and it's not quite, doesn't quite do everything that some of the other tools do yet, which is why I'm not using it in today's session. But I think if I do this session next year, I will definitely use Visual Studio Code and SOQL Builder in that demo. I actually did a session at Northeast Dreaming on Visual Studio Code for admins, because it has obviously lots of other use cases, and SOQL is one of them. Okay, but as I mentioned, I'm going to use Workbench today. It's my preferred tool, though I would see a Visual Studio Code being the one I embrace in the future. So Workbench, as you probably know, you simply go to workbench.developerforce.com. And from here you can log in. There we go. So I'm going to log into a production org. I would simply go in and then log in with my credentials, standard OAuth. And from here, you can do lots of different things, but obviously we're talking SOQL today. So you can see here we have a SOQL builder. It is telling us to go and use Visual Studio Code, as I mentioned. But here we can use the tool to write our SOQL for us. Now, I'm going to talk today about not doing that, about us writing it ourselves. But here you can see how easy it is to use those tools and write your SOQL, or have your SOQL written for you. You can bring in different fields, you can sort, you can filter, you can limit, you can include or exclude deleted or archived records. Oh, there we go. So that's getting into Workbench. Now, I just want to pause for one moment to say that I thoroughly recommend, if you're not doing it already, use Salesforce for your life. And that's one recommendation I always give to people starting off looking to get experience. I say, well, build in Salesforce, get a dev org and build something. And I've heard all sorts of stories over the years of people doing just that, using Salesforce to plan a holiday, a wedding, to track. Someone had twins in the ecosystem, and he tracked the number of nappies that he was going through. But it's a great use case for then. You could even use it in a job interview, showing this is the kind of thing I've built. And my example of that is trips to the theatre. Now, admittedly, pre-pandemic, I haven't been as much since, but living in London, big theatre goer. So I used a developer org and I had an app, and I built out objects such as the play object, I would then put the cast, the directors, the writers, and so forth all into the org. I used a calendar to view things, and played with Salesforce for a personal reason. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that today is because the org that I'm going to be showing the SOQL in is my theatre org. You saw it as I logged into Workbench. And so I've got things like the play object is where I'd store those which plays I'd been to see. Okay, so slight segue just to explain it, but it gave me an opportunity to give you my top tip as well. Okay, so let's get into SOQL. Now, remember, this is us now writing it, not using the selectors. So it's like using SOQL without stabilizers. Think of riding a bike with your stabilizer wheels. That's what using the main pick lists and say you select which object you're using from, you're querying. This now we're talking about writing it directly. So what do we do? So we start with select which fields we want in the results. And then we say from which object do these fields come from? So all SOQL statements will have these two. So in my example, I've got select name, comma, ID from play. So a couple of things to point out here. Just like in a formula, when you write out the list of fields you want to see in your query, the last one doesn't have a comma. So just like when you write a formula and you have your different lines in your formula, always remember that the last one doesn't have a comma, does it? So that's the same as in a SOQL statement. The other thing to highlight here is that we do use the API names in all instances. So my play object, we know that's not standard Salesforce. It is marked __C. Okay, but other than that, that's looking quite straightforward, isn't it? So let's look at how we'd actually do that in Workbench. So this time I'm not going to select from the object or the fields or use any of these. I'm just going to type in here. So let's have a look at that. So we've got select name, comma, ID from play __C. Okay, I can run that query and I get my totals. I get the numbers here. Okay, so really nice and easy. Now, one thing also to say is just like formulas, spacing doesn't matter. So I could have put these all on different lines. It wouldn't have made a difference. So just like when you write your formulas, you space it so that it makes sense to you, or I do. It's the same here. Okay, so let's add some operators. So first of all, we can have where. So of course, I might not want to see all of the plays that I've been to see recently. So I can say select name, comma, ID from play where the date, and that's another custom field, equals last year. Well, will you look at that? We've got last year. That's a dynamic date range. And we know those. We use those in reports. We use them in filters. So again, that's that knowledge you already have got, you can bring into writing a SOQL query. So we've got an equal sign last year. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Okay, so then let's think about and. We can add conditions to our conditions. So we've got select name, comma, ID from play where date equals last year and the rating, again another custom field, is more than, greater than 4. So again, these symbols here, you'll be very familiar with. None of this is particularly new to us. It's just using it in a different context. So I'm now saying, show me my names and IDs of my plays where the date on the play was last year and the rating was over 4, greater than 4. Okay. Now, maybe I might want to broaden that. Maybe that's too restrictive. So let's add an or in. Select name, comma, ID from play where date equals last year and the rating was over 4 or the cost was less than 20. So what I'm saying now is show me all of my plays that I attended last year that either were good, so had a rating of over 4, or cheap, so they cost me less than £20. Okay, but what else do you see here? We've got the parentheses, and this is just like doing your filter logic in your filters when your list views. Okay, so you'd have to do that there because as when you do that in a report or in a list view, of course, I want to make it clear that it's not last year and rating or just cost. Okay, so if I didn't have those parentheses in, it could be read as show me my plays from last year and with a rating of over 4, or just show me the cheap ones. So I don't want that. I want this to always be the case. Okay, so this isn't just for SOQL. This is that standard Salesforce that I'm sure you're all doing. So let's have a look at that in the system. So I'm going to pick up that query that we just had on the screen, exactly as you've seen it, and just pop it in, and that has brought me 4 results. So if I want, I can very easily just now type in the rating field and the cost field, requery it, and bring up the results like that. So I can see here the cane had a rating of 4, but it was only £12. The other 3 were 5-star ratings by me, and we've got their cost in there. Okay, and if I want to take out this logic there, I can do it, requery, and see. There's another one there that didn't become in my list because it was only a 3-star and it cost more than £20. Okay, looking good. So, what other operators do we have? So there'll be ones that you're all familiar with. Limit. So limit is where you're restricting. Show me just the top 10, maybe. So here we've got select name, ID, comma name from account. So that's no underscore C because it's obviously a standard object. Order by name ascending and limit by 10. So it just show me the top 10 accounts alphabetically. Nice and easy. We've got in, so here's an example of in. Maybe we've got select ID, comma name from account where billing state includes one of these. So SF, New York, San Francisco, New York, or DC. Actually, San Francisco is a city and not a state, so that wouldn't work, would it? Then we've got like. So here I've got show me my ID, names, and email from contact, where the first name is like Chris with a percentage sign. So that is like the wild card. So in SOQL, it's just an asterisk, but here in SQL, it's an asterisk. Here in SOQL, it's a percentage sign. So that would bring me my Chris's, my Christophers, my Christinas, my Christies, and anything else starting with those 5 letters. Okay. We can use sum, min, max, average. We've already talked about I had last year, so you can use today, you can use last month. And in that first intro to Workbench demo I did, I used the count tool, and you can type that as well. So you can just do count on account, say for example, say count from account, and it will say you've got 522 accounts in your org. Super quick. But you can also do count distinct. And count distinct is going to look for unique numbers. So you could say, how many uniquely named accounts have I got, or emails? That could be a useful one. So you can just type that out, count distinct, and then you put the field name there in parentheses from account. Okay. So pretty straightforward, but how about including related fields? So this is really where it comes into its own. What I've shown you so far, you're probably thinking, okay, well, I could do that quicker in a report. That's fine. But how about bringing in fields and filters from parents, child, or related objects? So let's do that next. So we can query using dot notation. Okay, so querying a related object using dot notation. So querying objects which have lookup relationships. Okay, so let's have a look at how that works. Let's start this one. So I'm going to go back and put the query in that I wrote before. Here we go, we've seen this bit. And now I want to bring in, well, who was the director of these, my top 4 from last year? So I've got a field called director on my play object, director __ C. Now, look what that tells us. That tells us that it's a lookup. So this is actually a lookup to the contact object where I store my directors. So what I have done here now is I have changed the C to an R, and then use dot notation, which simply means having the dot here, and then bringing in the field. Okay, so because there is a lookup from play to contact, here I'm on the play object, remember, I can simply put in director __ R for related, and then use a dot, because then I want the field from that related object. So it's looking up, pass over the lookup, and then I'm bringing back the name field. And you can see now I've got contact.name, because that's the object I'm looking at. But remember, I haven't referenced that anywhere. It's simply because we know, or the system knows, that director is the field there, and that's looking up to contact. Okay, so that's swapping that to an R. That's incredibly useful. So think wherever you've got the relationships, you can do that. Oh, no, we don't need to see it twice. Okay, so that's what we've got here. So we've got the query, but this is the cool part. Okay, so once we're looking via lookup relationships, we've got the R here, and then dot notation, that's what this means. We've got the name. So if I wanted to bring in their email address, I would put in email. Again, custom or standard field. If it was custom, it would just need the __ C. Okay, looking good. So what about other relationships? So that was a lookup from my play object to the contact object. But let's switch back to standard objects now and look at querying a parent account. or a parent object rather. So here I want to include account details in my contact query. So we've got here select ID, comma name, and then we've got comma account dot name. So because this is a parent object, we don't need to do the underscore underscore R. We can simply have in the object dot the name. So that's dot notation in its basic form. So really nice and easy. That would then mean that my query would have my IDs and my names of my contacts, and then all their account names as well. Okay, because the nature of that relationship. So that's how you'd bring in a parent object. And of course, we're doing it from contact. But what about going the other way around? So what about if we want to write a report, or write a query on our accounts and then also include all of their contacts? So here we could say select ID, comma name, and then we've got a subquery. So two things to point out here. One, I have got a comma here now because this isn't the last clause in the query. So I've got select ID, comma name, comma, and then in parentheses again, so another select title and name from contacts. Okay, so my query is on account, so that's where the ID and the name is coming from. But additionally to that, we're going to have name and title from contacts. Now, two things to point out to there. Obviously we have a select and a from again, and this time the contact, it's not singular, it's plural. So that's just one of those weird things that when you're using a subquery, you need to make it the plural form of the object. Okay, so if we're querying this, what happens if you write a report like this? Well, you're going to have the account ID and account name for every single line in your report, aren't you? That's what you'd get. But if you do it this way in a query, this is what it would look like. So this has got some information slightly redacted here, but you can see here you've got the ID of the account. We've got their billing city. We could, of course, have in their name in real life there, but this was some client data, so I've hidden it. And then underneath, we've got all their contacts. And again, the data you'd bring in here would be that was useful to you. So you can see we've got job title here and ID, but of course we'd bring in the name. Okay, so that's where we've got select ID and billing city, and then in parentheses, select ID title from contacts. Overall, this query is on from account, but we've got a where in here. So where account status equals open. And we've got an order. So order by name descending and limit to free. As you can see, there's just free here. So here is a combination of all of these different items. So we've got a query, we've got a subquery, we've got a where in there, we've got an order by in there, and we've got a limit. Okay, handy. So what are our limitations? So the objects, of course, must be related in order to return the values. So just like anything else, if you were trying to query using a formula or anything else, the relationship has to be there. So if you've got just a lookup, or you've got a master detail relationship, then you'll be able to do that. So when you're querying up, you can go up to 5 levels. So that is 5 dots in dot notation. So look at this one here. We've got contact dot account dot owner first name. Okay, so that's 3 levels. So we're querying the contact, but from that we're going to go to its account, and then the account's owner, and then show the first name. Okay, so that would count as 3 levels because there's 3 dots. So you can do another 2 of those. You can have up to 35 different child to parent relationships in a query. So that's a lot, I would say. So basically, nearly all of that you've got available. When it comes to parent to child, those subqueries, you can have 20, but you can only have one level. So you can only go from parent to child in that one level. Of course, you could then use a related SOQL statement to bring in then associated objects. Okay, so you can have up to 20 different ones, but they can only go down one level. So what do we need to remember when it comes to SOQL? Well, first of all, we always have a select and a from. So select is what fields we want to show, and the from is where are they coming from, what object. But remember, with the bringing in the related fields, you can actually bring in data from different related objects. We always have to use the API names. So of course, have the object open to perhaps remind yourself of some of those. And of course, that will often then mean __C. Don't be afraid of dot notation. It is really as easy as I've shown you to do. So account.name from contact is going to bring in the contact's account name. And that's all the dot notation means. So remember, once you bring in, say, my director's example, that R dot, I could then bring in anything from that related object. And remembering from the slide before, you can keep going just like you can in a formula. When we have subqueries, it is the plural form. Okay, so when you're using subqueries, it's contacts, not contact. Bit of a weird one, just one you have to remember. Just like in formulas, again, I keep referencing back to that because just why it's so accessible to admins. We want single quotes when we're looking at text values or pick list results. You can use includes and excludes for multi-select pick lists, and in and not in for standard pick lists. Okay, so that was, remember where I had those states, that was a pick list. And the wildcard in SOQL is the percentage sign, not the asterisk. If you've written SQL before, that might catch you out. I know it did for me for a while at the beginning. Okay. So what my recommendation is to everyone is to, next time you're going to write a report, just open up Workbench or Developer Console or another tool that you can write SOQL in, and try writing it out instead. Give it a go. I've had so many people coming up to me after these sessions that I've done in the past and saying that they used to have to write 5 different reports and then get them in Excel and merge them together and do something. And they did that as a regular task, and writing it out in SOQL using the relationship to navigate across different objects saved them doing that. They could write it in one SOQL statement, and then a tool like Workbench or the inspector tool, you can just then get that data out if you want to, or of course manipulate it in the system. So that's my recommendation. Go think of a report that you're writing at the moment or you regularly use, and maybe you need to manipulate it slightly, and try and write it in SOQL. For those of us that really like to work with data, I think you'll find it freeing to be able to get at the raw data in that way. And as I mentioned earlier, it's another great skill to have. And if you are looking to move more into the programmatic and want to learn Apex, then you will need to know SOQL, because SOQL statements are used within Apex. Okay, it's you use SOQL to call the data in your class or trigger or so forth, and then you use DML, data manipulation language, to change it. So you're giving yourself a head start there. What have we got on resources? Okay, so there are some Trailhead modules about SOQL. So there's one called SOQL for admins that's great. There's a few others that have SOQL in them, including, say, the Apex coding for admins has a bit of SOQL in there. Transform SQL queries to SOQL queries, that's another one. So they would be good starting points. When it comes to blog posts, there is, of course, the official developer documentation that has a good list of all the different tools you can use, and you have some general guidance there. There's a Women Code Heroes blog that has a sweet intro to SOQL. That's written by Kieran Richardson, who works for Salesforce. David Liu's SF99 has an intro to SOQL and why you should learn it. And on Salesforce Ben, there is a SOQL cheat sheet that is useful as well. Particularly, it has, say, some of the dynamic date terms you can use and things like that. Okay. So that brings me to the conclusion of that session. But I'm very happy to answer any questions. I'll have a quick look at the chat panel, but of course I will say thank you to our sponsors one more time. And those of you, if you've done the raffle, I will do that in a moment as well. So one question I can see that what are the prerequisites to learning Apex? Anything from SOQL? Yes. So as I mentioned, SOQL is used in Apex, so knowing it ahead of time will obviously will help you out there. Other prerequisites to learning Apex, I think if you've learnt or you know another programming language that's similar, it's object orientated, then that can give you a good head start. That's fine. But if you know any course, there's lots of courses out there that can help you learn Apex. If you are transitioning from another platform, then a lot of what you already know from a different programming language will help you there. But other than that, I'd say it's just like SOQL, any part, Apex, creating Lightning Web Components, whatever different writing flows, writing formulas, whatever we're learning in the Salesforce ecosystem. There's resources out there. It's just a matter of application and practice. Okay, so just see if I can see, there's a Q&A tab. I'll have a quick look at that as well. And then I will do the